All right, it's Friday, November 10th. This is an end of the day and end of the week SPY recap. And today on the daily chart, we end up with a 2-up green bar. We took out the high of the previous day, essentially started near the midpoint of the previous day and closed pretty strongly to the upside. And as it turns out on the daily chart, if we look at it, after a lot of exhaustion risk, 2-up, 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 and some major, weekly reversal here on this green bar, it turns out that these first 4 days of the week were pretty much just consolidation days, building up a little energy for what looks like a breakout and continuation to the upside. Now, coming into today, we discussed yesterday that we had this big 3-bar. So a 3-bar on this time frame is just broadening action, higher highs and lower lows, and it's certainly possible that you could then start back through the range that way. It's also possible. So you're coming in, for example, with expectations after this green bar, red bar, that you were going to at least test the lows of that bar at this end. It was the last day of the week. So at that moment, this weekly chart, as of the end of yesterday, was red, and it looked like a shooter bar was forming. We were right here near these lows, and if we just kind of closed down on Friday, that would have been a red bar that could have continued lower, and then we were talking all about if that would develop, then we would see how deep the pullback goes into this green bar. Not necessarily expecting much, but knowing it's a possibility. And now if you look at it, on the very last day of the week, this whole green bar, this whole weekly bar just turns to a big green bar breakout. So, it shows you how you just have to go day by day and follow price action. And in a second, I'll show you on the 15-minute chart how things unfolded and why, even though you came in with expectations to maybe take out lower and close lower and maybe follow through for a deeper pullback into these gaps, how price action just didn't lead you that way and actually led you to an entirely different scenario. So on the intraday chart, after the big move down yesterday, that 3-bar, again, this was just broadening action, higher highs, lower lows, and if it followed through, then there could have been, room to fill in this gap down here. But price immediately pre-market, between these blue lines, opened near the upper end of its range, and it was kind of near the midpoint of the prior day. First bar kind of went up, second bar just held kind of inside, and then this third bar broke to the downside. So while it wasn't necessarily, strong follow-through, starting out of the gates below the pre-market lows and below yesterday's low, it had a potential to get down there. So it wouldn't be at all out of line to kind of right here on bar 3 buy some puts and take a short trade and see if then that might have been the high of the day and we could have worked all the way down and kind of taken out those lows and continued lower. No problem with that at all if you wanted to kind of try that here. But look what happened. We always, my methodology anyway, always judges everything relative to this first bar. At that point, you're kind of, if you're going short here on bar 3, you're kind of anticipating it taking out that first bar low, and then you see what happens relative to going down to its next target, the pre-market lows. As it turned out, it did come down, take out those lows, so you were ahead on a trade. But then you had the 2 down, 2 up right here. And at that point, you just had to break even on this trade. It gave you an hour's worth of time to follow through below that first bar. It didn't want to do that. And as soon as it came back through the midpoint, and it was coming up through the midpoint of that first bar, which is, again, always a key reference point. So you had plenty of time to really break down, and it just wasn't doing that. At that point, I think, although I didn't do it, I was in other trades to the long side. Another thing, too, when this market was coming down, there were a lot of stocks. I was actually buying Meta, to the long side. I was interested in Microsoft to the long side. A lot of other stocks were kind of moving up as well. So you kind of knew there was a little bit of, it was a little disjoint, so to speak, where some stocks were moving up and the market wasn't really going down all that much. So all of a sudden your confidence on the downside was waning a little bit. Anyway, at that point, if you wanted to buy, in my opinion, calls here on this kind of reversal, midpoint of the first bar, to test that high, you could have done that. I didn't do that. I was already long stocks. But anyway, it comes up and breaks through the first bar high. At that point, I shot a video how on this little pause here, after it took out that first bar high, this is the real signal according to my methodology. Once it then gets above the first bar high, as long as it doesn't reject that area and head back to those lows, which it was just orderly pausing here, this was a great buy signal for me to start heading up and then seeing if we can get into the high yesterday. I, of course, shot some videos after it was moving up, not knowing if it would just kind of pause there and maybe just, continue sideways for the rest of the day, kind of as it's been doing all week. But as it turns out, it blew right through there, just orderly pause, and continued up for the rest of the day. So there was a very good, in my opinion, a break-even short trade here if you wanted to try it. and then either getting long right here or after this breakout and then the pause right in here. Two good long trades, and however you wanted to play it, it was, you could just sense the momentum all the way up. The 15-minute chart never really even pulled back at all. If you were watching it, there were a couple of red bars, but they were pause bars. So you didn't, it's possible coming up through here, you could have had an orderly pullback and then another push up. It didn't even do that. It just kind of continued up for the rest of the session. So bottom line is, it just proves that there was no actionable signal on the daily chart after this broadening action. You expected lower, but it was certainly possible, when you broaden out and you go higher high, lower low, and then you can come back to make higher highs again. That's a very strong possibility on, this daily chart, and that's what ended up happening. So you have to kind of let price action lead the way, knowing the different possibilities, that are in play here. And like I said yesterday, I think on the closing video, we expected lower, but if we kind of got above the midpoint as long as we stayed below the midpoint of the prior day, and it just didn't want to do that here at the open. It tried it for a moment, but then immediately started up, and there was an opportunity to kind of judge, hey, this was just obviously broadening on a shorter time frame, and this bigger picture trend was likely then getting back in gear. And then we close with a 2-up green bar. So coming into next week anyway, we have to get a 2-down green bar now to really say that this, maybe we just broadened out here, hit this target, followed through maybe for another day or two, but until we now get a 2-down weekly chart, we got to keep bias to the upside with some targets up higher here. The monthly chart, which I talked about, just triggered the 2-up month yesterday at a key, target area. As it ends up, it didn't really want to, start heading back into the range. It just wants to continue. So you got monthly targets up here with time to go in the month. So it's a lot of, strength. And now that I think you have some pausing action in here, big sideways action, there's no reason you can't get continuation to the upside as well. But as always, we'll go day by day. So that's the way today ended. I'm not going to say it was completely surprising, even though you came in expecting lower, but you have to have the flexibility to kind of grasp what the what the different options are given how price opens on the session. And today it showed you that it just wasn't going to follow through to the downside, and there was a lot of continuity to the upside of the big picture. I still always thought even if we headed lower, it was going to be tough to eat into this green bar. The monthly chart is still green, so green's the continuity. Once we started the open and kind of got back through the open of this week, we were green on the week for a moment. The daily chart opened up and continued green. So at this point here, when we were breaking above a first bar high, everything was green. So there was just no reason to, at that point, you abandoned the short, call at that point. And as it turns out, we got pretty strong momentum all the way through the rest of the session. So let's see what happens next week. As long as we hold the midpoint of this, bar, then let's see if we follow through higher, and we'll kind of go from there. And at this point, until this weekly chart really gives you some kind of failure, it can go up, come back through the midpoint of that bar, or maybe we gap down for some reason, next day trading and get a 2-down bar. Until that weekly chart changes, we're biased to the upside. And frankly, ever since this reversal, we've been sort of biased to the upside all the time, and looking for probably a pullback of some kind, but then also on any pullback, knowing that might be the best opportunities to get long. So in this case, it was just kind of, one day really of a pullback at this moment, and now we're heading higher again.